Hey there! In today's video, we'll explore the philosophical ideas hidden in Elden Ring, and how specific moments in the game can be analyzed through the lens of classic philosophy. In a world full of decay, tyranny, and struggles for power, there are deep philosophical themes at play. We'll focus on how certain gameplay moments reflect Nietzsche's ideas, existentialism, free will, and cyclical time. Let's break down what Elden Ring reveals about philosophy through its characters and in-game events. Will to power and the Übermensch. Characters striving for power. One of the central philosophical motifs in Elden Ring is the fight for power, symbolized by the rings that grant their wielders near godlike abilities. But beyond the physical combat, the game delves deep into the notion of will, the will to assert power and change the world. This directly ties into Nietzsche's philosophy of the Übermensch, or Superman, and his concept of will to power. Take, for example, the character of Michele. His ambitions to reshape the world and even challenge divine authority echo Nietzsche's idea of the Übermensch, a figure who transcends conventional morality and creates their own values. Michele's attempt to manipulate fate and even defy death mirrors Nietzsche's philosophy. The struggle to impose one's will on the world, regardless of its moral or existential consequences. His actions lead to chaos and destruction, but they are driven by an inner conviction to create something new, much like how Nietzsche envisioned the role of the Übermensch in the world. These characters, like Michele, seek to impose their will upon the world, often through violence, or by rejecting the moral structures that currently exist. This drive for power and the destruction of old forms is very much in line with Nietzsche's belief that the Übermensch must break free from traditional norms and values in order to create their own path. Existentialism, the search for meaning and the struggle against death. In Elden Ring, players encounter countless characters struggling to find meaning in a world that has clearly lost its way. This quest for meaning and the question of existence ties directly into existentialist philosophy, especially the work of Albert Camus. One of the most striking aspects of the game is the overarching question: why continue fighting in a world that seems destined for destruction? Characters like Godric or Radahn wrestle with the meaning of their existence, often facing death without clear answers. This mirrors Camus' existentialism, which proposes that life has no inherent meaning, and it is up to each individual to create meaning through their own actions. In Elden Ring, characters like Godric are trapped in a cycle of decay, yet they continue to fight, embodying the existential struggle against the absurdity of existence. As Camus wrote, life's absurdity is not to be feared, but embraced, a theme that resonates deeply with the world of Elden Ring, where characters continue their struggles even as they acknowledge the world's meaninglessness. Lady Marika is another embodiment of this struggle. She is a powerful yet tragic figure whose attempt to restore her lost identity shows the existential search for self-definition, despite the harsh reality that nothing in this world lasts forever. The player's own journey mirrors this, battling through endless cycles of death and rebirth, never fully understanding why, but persisting regardless. Free will and choice, Sartre's philosophy of freedom. The theme of free will and personal responsibility plays a crucial role in Elden Ring. Players are constantly faced with moral decisions that affect the game's world and characters. These choices are not just tactical. They represent a deeper philosophical question about freedom and the responsibility that comes with it. This echoes the philosophy of Jean-Paul Sartre, who argued that humans are condemned to be free, and with this freedom comes the burden of making choices without predefined meaning. Take, for example, the decision to ally with Melina or oppose her. This moment, like many others in Elden Ring, is a choice that impacts not only the storyline, but the moral trajectory of the game world. Sartre argued that our freedom defines us, but it also places an enormous responsibility on our shoulders, something that is reflected in the game, as though players must live with the consequences of their actions, whether good or bad. The final battle, where the player can choose to restore the old gods or destroy them, presents a stark moral dilemma that touches on Sartre's concept of existential freedom. Whatever path the player chooses, the weight of that decision is always theirs to carry. This is freedom at its most intense. The freedom to shape the world, but also to deal with the fallout, eternal return, and cyclical time. Nietzsche and Heidegger's views on time. One of the most fascinating philosophical themes in Elden Ring is the concept of time, specifically cyclical time and the idea of eternal return. This is a direct nod to Nietzsche's philosophy of eternal recurrence, where time is not linear but instead repeats itself over and over. In Elden Ring, death and rebirth are not just game mechanics, but philosophical concepts that echo the idea that life, destruction, and creation are endlessly cyclical. Each time the player dies and respawns, it mirrors the notion of eternal return, the idea that every event, no matter how seemingly insignificant, will repeat forever. This endless cycle is a direct reflection of Nietzsche's concept of eternal return. The idea that we must live as if we were destined to repeat our actions eternally, and therefore we should live our lives in such a way that we would be willing to relive them infinitely. Heidegger's philosophy of being toward death is also reflected in Elden Ring, where death is not seen as an end point, but rather an integral part of existence. The cyclical nature of time in the game, where death leads to rebirth and new challenges, is a powerful metaphor for the idea that existence itself is cyclical and ultimately defined by time. 5. The problem of evil and morality. The story of destruction and moral choices. Elden Ring also deals with complex questions about morality, good, and evil. The game's world is not divided into clear-cut categories of good and evil. Instead, it presents players with morally ambiguous characters and choices. For instance, the gods in Elden Ring may be seen as forces of evil in the eyes of certain characters, while their destruction might be seen as a necessary act of liberation. Take the character of Erdtree. Its fall is symbolic of the destruction of old systems of power, which players can choose to either embrace or challenge. This aligns with Kant's and Schopenhauer's ideas about the nature of evil. Evil often arises from the pursuit of selfish desires or the rejection of moral duty. In Elden Ring, players must confront the consequences of their actions, and their moral choices ultimately shape the world around them. The game's many dilemmas, where the player must decide who lives and who dies, highlight the complex nature of evil in a morally ambiguous world. These decisions force players to wrestle with their own ethical frameworks, much like philosophers have done for centuries. Conclusion: Elden Ring is not just a game about slaying monsters. It is a philosophical journey that grapples with issues of will, meaning, freedom, time, and morality. By examining the game's key moments and characters, we can uncover how Nietzsche's will to power, existentialism, the freedom of choice, and the cyclical nature of existence are reflected in the world of Elden Ring. Each battle, each decision, each cycle of death and rebirth asks the player to confront profound questions about life, suffering, and the creation of meaning in a world that may ultimately have none. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave a comment sharing your thoughts on the philosophical themes in Elden Ring. What philosophical ideas do you think are most present in the game? See you in the next video.